The Yamaha DX7, a synthesizer that changed and defined an era. Despite being such a major icon, this one here was abused and neglected. Luckily, I came along and saved it. The previous owner said it wouldn't make any noise, but it would turn on. The keys were jacked up, and it was pretty dirty. The fact it would turn on but wouldn't make any noise, or little, if it would, if any, was a pretty good indicator that the electrolytic capacitors on the DC board had to be replaced. So I know this is probably going to be a pretty easy fix. Now with a little backstory out of the way, let's get onto the repair and check out some before photos. As you can see, this thing isn't in great shape. Decorated in basement funk and looks like you could use some braces. And if you're wondering, that white thing on top of the keys is a stopper that's supposed to be installed to keep the keys in place. Obviously, this thing is gonna need a good cleaning. And, yeah, that stopper is supposed to prevent these keys from looking like this. This did come with the cartridges, which is a huge plus, but last owner had some pretty dirty hands. And sitting in a basement for a while didn't help it any. But I'll clean it up a bit and it should look pretty good after that. And oh my god, look at that oxidation. Don't store your synths in a basement. On the hinges too, which is gonna make this hard to open. I'm gonna start by removing the front panel, which is 4 screws on the top, 2 on the left, 2 on the right. And then there is also going to be one on the back right-hand side, none on the left. And let's take a quick look inside. Looks pretty good, which is a good sign. But let's open this up and get a better look. Looked alright, and I'm going to start by removing the keys. The one that was jacked up was being pretty stubborn, so I'm going to try to remove some of the easier keys first. The keys come out by pressing them down, pushing them forward, and then out. There are also these metal little tabs in the keys, which are referred to as springs. They may stay in place when you take them out. As you can see, some of them come out when I'm taking this apart. I tried to collect them at first, but realized it was easier to collect them at the end. Still try to get that one jacked up key out, but doesn't want to, so I clean up a little bit first. And then after a bit of negotiation, I get it to come out. Now for some more cleaning. A little bit on the bottom of the Keybed because it has it in the basement, and a little bit on the outside, but I'll get it better later. Next, I move on to remove the phones panel, which houses the breather and headphones jack. I also need to release the Keybed. There was 4 screws underneath I forgot to do. Would have been easier before I removed the front panel. And then there's also 3 screws on top you're supposed to do. It looks like I already got them. I disconnect some cables. A few on the left for the mod and pitch wheel. Another cable connector between the soundboard and the Keybed, a ribbon connector as well, and the ground is wired in. Unscrew that, and I'm going to put the screw back in place so I don't lose it. Dust out some of the dust here. Very dusty. A little bit more cleaning, of course. Just like to clean up a little bit as I go. Makes it a little easier, and I don't get as dirty. So I'm going to remove this one screw here to release the phones board, and the cables I just slip out of the clips, clean around him, try to get rid of that funk there. And check it out, and I decided to scrub it with a good Q-tip here. I have a fine tipped one, makes it pretty easy to clean. Next, I go to the DC board and disconnect some cables there. Clean up around the area. More cables to be disconnected, and then I had to get some needle nose pliers to help unclip this thing from the chassis. After carefully doing so, I do get it out. Things don't look too bad on there, but we're gonna move on to the soundboard. Plenty of wires on this one that need to be disconnected. We're taking this out so we can replace the battery on it. It seems to be still functional, but they tend to go after a couple decades, so ain't gonna hurt to replace it. And it's gonna allow me to clean this thing out a little bit better. Before it comes out, I have to remove this rail here. I'm gonna put the screws back in place, and then I can start unscrewing the soundboard. And that's several screws all around the whole thing. After carefully removing it, I'm gonna put the screws back in place, again, not to lose them. Of course, more cleaning. And a little bit cleaning on the slider since I have the Q-tip out. And here is the DC board and the 6 electrolytic capacitors we're going to replace. And now for the desoldering to begin. A little flux on the points. I used the desoldering blade. I didn't have a pump at the time. And of course I sped this up because it takes me a while. But they do come out relatively easy. And then clean up any residual solder. And reminder that when installing electrolytic capacitors, they are polarized, so there is a direct. The lead with a longer leg with the side with a band on it is the negative terminal, and obviously the other is the positive. Now I'm ready to solder in this capacitor, add some flux, a little solder to the tip of the iron, tap it real quick, and it should be as easy as that. Usually. Sometimes it takes a little bit more. Move on to the next capacitor. Also paying attention to polarity. Flux and solder again. And we got those two in. Now we're going to move to desoldering some of the larger ones. A little bit of time with the braid, and they should come out. But the difficult thing with these, as I try to point out there real quick, is they're glued. So I had to use a razor blade to kind of scrape these out while still being careful of other components. And after a little bit of wiggling, they do come out. I carry on to then desoldering the largest capacitor. This one takes a little bit more work because there is a bit more solder involved. And the most difficult part with this one is it's also glued, but in a very tricky spot. A bunch of components nearby, hard to get a razor in there. But of course, after a bit of time and negotiation, I do free it. Now here's the old capacitor, and this is the new one. Huge difference on this one. But again, polarity counts here. Put that in, and then we're gonna get ready to solder again. More flux. Pinky out, of course I'm fancy. Chin that tip, tap it on to the next lead. Boom, bada bang. All right, Onto the two smaller ones, again, paying attention to polarity. Flux it up. Tap on some solder. Of course, I'm trying to be careful there not to burn up my little clamps. Next one. Prep it. Now that they're all in, we can clip off the excess leads. And I'm going to clean off any flux that may be there. And then we're going to take off the battery. I have removed the tab. And this is the replacement board for the battery. Battery pops in and out. Uses a standard CR2032 battery. So we're going to remove the battery first. So I'm going to flux up the terminal for that. This one didn't want to come out so easily as some of the other stuff, but it does come out. Next for the tab, it's stubborn as well, but it does eventually come out. The soundboard has the polarity for the battery labeled, as well as the battery board. So 1, 2, and it's that easy. So we're going to flux it up and solder on these leads. I messed up that one, we'll fix it up a little bit. Check it. It looks good there. Moving on to the next. Trim the leads. Clean it up. And now we're ready to put it back together. So I'm going to remove the screws that hold the soundboard down. Takes a bit of time, but it's better than losing them. Gently put it back into place, and now the screws go back in place. I lost one of the screws in the process, so looks like I'm probably gonna have to lift this up. And there it is. Now that all the screws are in, we'll just snug them up. And then we snap the DC board back into place and put the connectors back on it. Now I take the battery out for the new battery. Pops right in place. And now I clean the surface of the battery board and the chassis so I can mount some Velcro to it. It's kind of important to clean it to make sure the adhesive gets a good bite. And now I'm just lining it up, making sure it looks pretty in there. And peel off the back of the adhesive and press it into place. And there it is, looking good. Alright. Now we're going to put the rail back in place. First remove the screws that I put back. And back there they go. Now for a little bit more cleaning for where the keys are. Get a little toothbrush here to get in a little more better there. But as I'm cleaning this, I do realize that some of these tabs here have gotten bent out of shape, so let me show you real quick. These are supposed to sense when the key is being pressed, so pretty important that we get these back in place. It's probably going to be a bit of work. I tried doing it while it's still mounted, but that proves to be difficult. So I move on to cleaning the mod and pitch wheel. Quick little scrub and wipe down does it pretty good. And as you can see, the keys are filthy. So we're gonna make sure we remove these springs first, and we're gonna give them a bath. Scrub it up, dub. After scrubbing in here, they're pretty clean and ready to go back in. The keys are labeled CF, D, BE, G, A, and C prime, so you know where these keys go. And we're going to put the springs back in. The notched end goes into the key, and the flat end is the one that sticks out. And now comes the tedious task of reinstalling the springs and putting the keys back into place. So of course I sped this up, but it does take a while. Not hard, but time consuming. And I sped up to the last few keys here, and here's the final one, and done. So back to the tabs. I removed this board which the tabs attached, which should make it a lot easier to bend these back into place. So after a bit of careful work, I am able to bend these back into place. And it's ready to go back in. Before doing so, I decided to lubricate some of these keys up, since I did clean off some of the lubricant that was there before when I was cleaning. Line it up, make sure everything is nicely in place, and screw it back in. Lost a screw for a second, but we got it. Now to snug them all up. Put the stopper in place. And we're going to screw in the phones panel again. Starting with the panel and the board. Snap the wires back in place. Start with the ribbon here. Ground. Lay it down. And then I screw in the top of the keyboard. And then the 4 screws on the bottom. I move on to the cables next. I did take a picture with my phone, so that's what I'm looking at here, just to make sure I put everything in the right place. The ribbon ones are pretty straightforward, but hey, I don't want to make any mistakes, so I'll try to make things easier for myself. Takes a bit of time. Carefully put this so none of the wires get in the way. And then we move on to the front. Scrubbing it down. Of course, I have to be careful where there is that little break on the selection on the right there. Toothbrush to get in some of the crooks and nannies. And there is plenty to clean on this. Some of these buttons got some built up grime, so it takes a little bit of work with the toothbrush here. But they do lighten up. Do have to be careful with the broken one again. Lots of grime. Lots of grime. You can see him changing color. Now I'm going to screw in that front panel, the one in the back, and the 4 screws on top. And there she is, all cleaned up and ready to go.